In this session, we're going to talk about simple and compound interest. If you think about when you put money in a bank will pay you interest on that money. So every year, they will add extra money into your account. Simple interest is the same amount every year. So if you were to put £100 into a bank for 5 years, you would get a percentage interest on that, and you get the same amount every year. So these ones are really easy to calculate. That's why it's called simple interest. For example, if you were to put £1,000 in a bank and you get 10% interest, 10% of 1,000 would be £100. So every year that money sits in that bank, you would get an extra £100. So after 2 years, you'd get 200. After 3 years, you'd get 300. And that would add on to the original amount of 1,000. That's simple interest. Really basic. We can calculate these percentages using the multiplier method that I showed you in the previous video. For example, Sally deposits £600 into a bank. The interest rate is 5% per annum. That just means per year. So every year, she's going to get an extra 5% on that £600. So let's first find 5% of 600, using the multiplier method. 5% as a decimal is 0.05. So to find 5% of 600, I just need to do 0.05 times 600. My answer to this is £30. So every year that money sits in that account, she will get an extra £30. So let's say it sits there for 3 years. She'll get £30 for 3 years, which is £90. So after 3 years, she will have £690 in her account. Compound interest is slightly different. It's a bit more tricky to work out, because once you've done 1 year and you've worked out interest and added it on, you've then got a new amount. So the interest for the second year will then be found based on that new amount that you've got. So it compounds every year. So it's not the same amount that you increase by every time. There's a simple formula for finding this. All we do is we have the starting amount. We multiply it by the multiplier to the power of the number of years. So let's put this into practice. £4,000 is invested into a bank at 3% interest per annum. And this interest is compound. They invest the money for 2 years. How much will they have in the account after 2 years? So our starting amount is £4,000. That can go straight into our formula. But then we need to find our multiplier. So what we've got to think of is we're increasing by 3%. So start with 100% and add on the 3, 103%. Now make that a multiplier, 1.03. So there's your multiplier in your equation. I then put this to the power of the number of years, 2 years. So that means 1.03 squared. In this case, the answer is £4,243.60. So that will be the amount they will have after 2 years in that bank. Let's look at another example, but this time it's going to depreciate. That means it goes down. So someone buys a van for £10,000. The van depreciates in cost at a rate of 20% per year. So each year, the cost of the van will decrease by 20%. What's the value of the van after 3 years? So it's the same formula, the starting amount times by the multiplier to the power of the number of years. My starting amount is £10,000. My multiplier in this case, I'm starting with 100% and I'm decreasing it by 20%. So that's now 80%. So to write that as a multiplier, it's 0.8. So there goes my multiplier in the equation to the power of 3 years. So in my calculator, all I need to type is 10,000 multiplied by 0.8 times 0.8 times 0.8. That's the same as to the power of 3. When I put this in my calculator, I then get £5,120. So that's what the van would be worth after 3 years.